All right. How's everyone doing? How's everyone doing? Let's fade that music out just a little. It was a little strong. It was a little strong. How's everyone doing now? Hopefully you're all doing well. Hopefully you're all doing well. All right. So we got some good things to cover in the news today. Yeah. Now I'm streaming in the talk shows and podcasts. I have streamed 1 second. Sorry about that. All right. So I have. I'm just trying in the talk shows. I mean, it's the tech news. I'm not sure if it goes here or in the programming. So we're doing it here. We'll see. We'll see if this gets any new people in. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump into our news for today. We got a couple exciting things. To go over. You know, we're going to start with security like we always do. I think it's really important for engineers to be security minded. You don't have to be a security professional just to be thinking about it, but have it in the back of your mind when you do these things. You know, I saw this article on Tech Radar and I was like, I know we've talked about it before, but it's always a good reminder to think about these things. PyPy, one of the most popular Python package repositories in the world, has a typo squatting version of the Fabric library, a very popular library called Fabrice, a package for SSH-based remote server management that is just stealing your credentials. That's all it does, really. I mean, it does the same thing as Fabric, but with the added benefit of stealing your credentials. It has more than 200 million downloads. So just a reminder to take these things seriously as you do them. It is very important. And it's little simple things like this that can get you in big trouble. Another thing that I followed up on for you guys was I saw this. D-Link refuses to patch a security flaw on over 60,000 NAS devices. These devices, I looked them up because I thought, man, I'm gonna blast D-Link here for refusal. The reason they refused him is it's an 18-year-old device that has been not supported for the last 6 years. So honestly, in my opinion, that's probably fine. You have to understand that not all hardware that you buy is going to be updated and patched indefinitely. Apple does this with their phones and computers, so it really makes sense. It stinks if you have one of these older routers. There is actually a pretty bad, I think it's 9.2, yeah, a severity score of 9.2. So basically they get access to all your data. They can encrypt it if they want. The only thing is it's fairly technical to actually do, but if you actually know computers, if you're a software engineer, it's not that bad. It might keep, my 12-year-old son from doing maybe. So anyways, if you have one of these older D-Link, there is a vulnerability and it's not going to get patched. Now, it would have been really cool if D-Link did offer a patch, like if it was a simple thing to fix. Now, it very well could be that it's not a simple thing, and that's why they didn't, just do a nice thing and release a patch for it. So that was all I saw in security for today, for this week. Did you guys see anything else in security? Was there any other tidbits? Now, I have one other thing to talk about in security, and then I always encourage you guys to bring stuff and alert me on my Discord if you find stuff through the week for me to investigate and report on. Now, I saw this. So the SD Times made this article. Less complex applications are more likely to have security vulnerabilities than their more complex counterparts. This got me peaked. Now, this article was written based off of a write-up done by Black Duck. Black Duck came up with the software vulnerability snapshot, their 2024 snapshot. I offered up my email to get this, so you're welcome. I am now getting emails by Black Duck on these topics. But so this report that is in SD Times is based off of that. And it basically says the simpler the application, the more likely there are to be vulnerabilities. And I actually take issue with this. Now, what I wanted to make sure was that Black Duck wasn't saying this themselves. And while I think that they didn't do a good enough job of clarifying and that people like the SD Times could draw this conclusion themselves, let's get into why I think they're wrong. They're not wrong technically. But the reason isn't the simpler application. That's the wrong conclusion that they're looking at. They're looking at that, not the industry that wrote the application. If you actually go through this with a keen eye and read it, the thing is, these simpler applications are in industries that aren't in tech. So the real conclusion is people that don't understand software and are either using AI to deploy it or are getting contractors to do it or hire somebody, but or have somebody inside that's kind of in tech, are deploying less secure applications. And those applications tend to be much simpler as well because they don't make Facebook. They don't make any of these other things. And they go into other characteristics here that also go that the smaller applications take longer to patch the vulnerabilities. And this, again, is true. Those people aren't even watching for vulnerabilities on their websites. They're small, simple applications. This includes things like blogs that people might not even care about. So I wanted to clarify this because this is kind of a big deal if it was true as written. It is factually correct, but the conclusions I think are wildly misleading. And I don't like this type of reporting. This is why I'm calling you out, SD Times. I need you guys to do a better job of reading these so that I don't have to give Black Duck my email address to get the report and read it. It's not a bad report. They do go into the different sectors that are having these, and you'll notice that it's mostly the different sectors that have simpler websites, and those are also the ones that have more vulnerabilities. So I don't think it's a bad. I at first thought that it was going to be a bad report from Black Duck. It actually seems pretty good. If you want to go get it, you can go get it. I could cover it in a little bit more detail, but no, we've covered it pretty well. That being said, they did release this blog post that I think kind of leads into how the SD Times got this. And I would warn Black Duck that there are people like the SD Times that are going to read your blog post and not read the entirety of your, 20-page research and actually look at it with a critical eye. Because they took this as they kind of ignored the industry specific insights, and just kind of took that the larger the website, the more complex the website, the more secure it was, and didn't really tie them together. But anyways, I just wanted to. I bet it's all related to people writing their own solutions for issues that have been completely standardized by the market because of those vulnerability reasons. Log manager, yeah. I mean, this is the problem with research data as a whole. You can always make data work for you. You can always take data and massage it into a way that's good for you. And this is something you always have to understand, is that we're really a lot of times reading the interpretation of data, because data doesn't actually tell a story. Data is just points that have been recorded. The story is told by somebody that read the data, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, the data tells a story. No, the statistical analysis takes those points and tells a story based off of it. And you have to understand that how you want to look at it can, vastly alter the story that can be told. Vastly. All right, let's do something new. Let's jump right into cloud news. I wanted to do this because I like changing it up. And right now, we could use some cloud news. All right. So what's first in cloud news? All right. AWS still has no news. Again, reInvent December 5th, I believe it is. Until reInvent, AWS pretty much just stops doing new stuff. I didn't see this. Yeah. The defaults have been increased. I don't know. Okay, that's fine. But they pretty much stopped doing anything really new and interesting. This is at least interesting. I hadn't seen it. Breaking news. Let's see. November 14th. This was yesterday. I was going to say I pulled this stuff up yesterday. I'm wondering if this wasn't there yesterday when I saw it, when I checked it. But as of yesterday, your S3 buckets are up. Your default quota is up to 10,000. That's actually quite a few. I don't know that I've ever been a place where we bucket that much, but there's definitely architectures where you could, like, every account gets their own a bucket or something like that you could do for isolation. So yeah, I mean, if that's you, the 1 million buckets is right up your alley if you want to support 1 million users. In cloud news, we have reCAPTCHA password leak detection container app microservice in public preview. This is a thing that was just released by Azure, the Azure team. It's a self-contained implementation of the reCAPTCHA password leak detection feature. Basically, a container that takes a password and then runs and checks a bunch of sources to see if that shows up in any of the leaks. So if that's something you've wanted to add to your application, this seems like, and you're already using like something like Kubernetes or something like that, this seems like it might be a really easy way to add that to your cluster and have a password leak detection. So that was pretty cool. This was by Google. Sorry, I said Azure. And I was wrong. This was from Google. My bad, Google. I apologize. Oh, right, Dutch. What having 10,000 buckets is quite a lot, because like I said, either I've never had an architecture that requires that much, unless the only thing that I can think of is an architecture where every customer gets their own, and that bucket is in your infrastructure, not their infrastructure. So yeah, it's a lot of buckets. It's a lot of buckets. I don't know if people have that type of architecture and that's how they do multi-tenancy. It's definitely a possibility now that you can support 1 million buckets, but yeah. All right. Let's move on to Azure, who actually has updated their website. You know how for the longest of time they said that they were going through updates and whatnot? It's vastly changed. It's vastly changed. But before we get into that, let's talk about Windows Server 2025. Who cares? It's generally available with advanced security, improved performance, and cloud agility. Whatever that means, we don't care. But if you happen to care, if you happen to be one of those few sorry souls that uses Windows Server, it's out there, waiting for its first adopter, waiting for somebody to actually leverage it. It wants you to use it. Unlocking the future. Azure network updates on security, reliability, and high availability. So there's been a lot of Azure networking updates for security. And I feel like these have come, we talked about 6 months ago where Microsoft actually started tying bonuses for executives and leaderships on meeting security needs. I feel like this is part of what is coming out of that. Those executives looking for those bonuses have really put a push to this. And you're going to see this article. I'm going to post this in chat for you all. What we're going to see is that if you look at the updates, you're going to see a lot of those. Now, the very first one, and this is where it's different. I can't pull them up in their own tab like I normally do. They just kind of open and close here. It's maybe not as nice for me, but for you guys, it's probably even nicer. The general availability of Azure Chaos Studio now supports faults for AKS clusters using managed identity authentication. So this enables customers with enhanced security posture for AKS clusters to perform a fault injection. So basically, you can use your managed identity. It used to be and I actually didn't realize this, but it used to be that if you use the managed identity authentication, you couldn't actually use Azure KSOS Studio for your 8KS clusters, which was a pretty big negative drawback, because that was how you provided better security for your clusters. So having the best security disabled you from having the tool. This is good that it's there. The next thing that was really interesting here was TLS 1.2 to become the minimum TLS version for Azure Storage. Now, I highly recommend you use at least TLS 1.3, but I get it. Sometimes you have those legacy apps. This is a really good security networking posture. They have kept and continue to bump up the minimum requirements. We've talked about this a year ago, I believe, when they dropped 1.1. They are, or they dropped 1.0 and went to 1.1 only, and now it's going to be 1.2 by October 31st, 2025. You have some time. But I honestly recommend you bite the bullet. You go to 1.3 right now. Just do it. Just do it. I have not heard a good reason why you can't do it. Again, more networking, security. I'm going to say security, but the Advanced Container Network Service for Azure Kubernetes Service, it's really a security. Your Advanced Container Network Service is really a piece of security. It's going to allow you to do advanced networking. The Advanced Container Network Service filtering capabilities for network policies. So basically, you're allowed to do somewhat of a firewall for your external communications, but it's also an internal security tool as well. So that's pretty awesome. And then I forgot about this. We'll get back to that. What I wanted to do was this one, the network isolated cluster in AKS, built on top of that advanced security, advanced networking. Today, you can control AKS's cluster egress traffic using a Azure firewall. So basically, it's not a true air-gapped solution, but you can now configure and control your egress traffic, which is huge. I actually do this in my home lab. I don't allow traffic just to anywhere. In fact, I don't allow DNS traffic except to my DNS machine, which then uses TLS, which is why Google Chromecast don't work in my house. So this is really important from a security standpoint. And again, I think that this has all come from that network or that security posturing that Microsoft has really done. So I told you that I'd be watching for that, and I see a lot of stuff like this, and I can't help but believe that's that mandate at work. So we'll see. And the last thing that we saw was public preview of the Azure API Center plugin for GitHub Copilot for Azure. See, this is why I don't like this. I didn't get to like order the tabs and how I wanted to do it. I'm gonna have to see if I can't get these to be in their own tabs. We'll see. GitHub Copilot has rapidly become a favorite among developers thanks to its conversational, not controversial, chat interface and seamless IDE integration. Welcome to the channel for all you guys. I struggle to speak English. It's my first language. That's why. So anyways, they have given you an API for Copilot in the API Center. This seems really cool. I know that Copilot is one of the better ones. And Copilot actually now lets you hit other API backends. So I'm kind of interested to see how all of that works. It might be a really cool integration. Yeah. And the last one is from a company that we don't normally see on this list. Launch Darkly launches guarded releases to improve release confidence at early stage of application rollouts. So if you guys don't know what Launch Darkly is, it's probably the one and most premium. It's a pretty expensive feature flag solution if you're trying to implement feature flags, it's a pretty well-founded one. Now it's pretty expensive too. I'm gonna throw that out there, but it has some pretty awesome features. That being said, they're releasing this ability to have guarded releases to improve release confidence at every stage of an application rollout. I wanted to talk about it a little bit because I feel like guarding my release is not how I have confidence in a release. I find that I could hand cherry pick, and you know, there's definitely reasons to have guarded releases, but it doesn't. It's not confidence that I'm looking at. That's not the reason I need a guarded release. There's other reasons that they're convenient for synchronization and other things. It's how your teams operate. It's how your teams operate. It's how you structure your releases. It's how you structure your teams. Those are the things. It's how your teams develop and deploy applications. Guarding your releases is probably not even that big of a deal. I mean, you can maybe get a little bit more confidence with a guarded release, and maybe you leverage that in how you deploy software. But how you work as a team and how you deploy software is the big thing. And now, if you're able to leverage guarded releases in that to build confidence, then fantastic. But I guess my big takeaway is don't expect a tool to give you perfect releases. It's not the tool that gives those to you. It's your ability. Tools are only as good as how you use them. That's all I'm saying. It'll help significantly with testing air gapped. Absolutely. There's, like I said, there's reasons to use things like guarded releases. 100%. My point that I wanted to make clear was you can't rely on a tool to fix your broken and bad deployment practices, engineering practices, and things like that. You can leverage the tools for very specific reasons, but those are good, well-engineered teams. Oh, that was in Azure? Okay. Sorry. All right. Sorry, I get talking on stuff and then Now, while Google didn't really have a whole lot, it had one big announcement, and really, it wasn't Google that made the announcement. But if you guys have been investing a lot in Keras, Google's AI, power of the future, Google's future for AI stuff, is leaving Google. The main brainchild behind Keras and Google's efforts in the AI field are brought to you by this person. And this person is now leaving. What is the fate of Keras? I don't know. Now, on a good note, he said he's going to continue working on Keras just from an outside contributor point of view. So it's probably not the end of the road for Keras. So you're probably fine. You're probably fine. But will Google kill it next year? That's maybe. Absolutely maybe. I see 0 use for Launch Darkly if you add feature flags yourself to your application. You know, you could say this about most things. I see 0 use for a self-managed or a managed database. You can just manage your own. You can see zero use for managed feature flags. You could just do it yourself. You can do everything yourself. The question is, how fast are you trying to move? How much do you want to manage yourself? And things like that. I think that's a big question you got to ask. All right. We have a little bit of AI news. We're going to talk about that. And then we have some really exciting news on just around the web from the CNCF, VMware. Yeah, VMware. VMware is how to try to win back customers. The best way is not to lose them in the first place. But, if you do that, what's the next best way to win them back? And then some small stuff from the Kubernetes community. So we're gonna fly through this AI stuff. Exciting news for VMware. So let's jump into it. One of the things that's interesting. I haven't tried it. I'm gonna see if I can't figure out a way to try it. Microsoft unveils Magnetic One, an AI agent that can browse the web and write code. So it's like a web scraper, ChatGPT Copilot rolled into one. I'm not entirely sure, but that's what we're gonna have to try and find out. But that's what Magnetic One. I couldn't actually find a way to leverage or get Magnetic One just yet. I'm gonna still try to do that, and we'll have a stream of me trying Magnetic One if I can get it and actually try it. So far, I've just seen news articles on it, so we're gonna move on. This was I found multiple articles. Now, if you guys remember, I have notoriously said this. The way that AI is going, and I've got to draw this because I have 100% said this multiple times. Multiple not times that if you looked at, let's say we had these points, and this was ChatGPT 2. This was 2. This was 2. This is 3. This is Turbo. This is 3.5. This is 4. The curve is looking like this. Okay? Each step is a smaller improvement. 1.0 or 0.1, 0.1 is actually, I would say, bigger than 4. 4.0 to 3.5 to 4.0. I actually feel like this was kind of a bigger step, but it's still, it feels like diminishing returns. And I have said this for a while, that this is the feeling I get from them, despite blowing away much bigger benchmarks. When you're actually applicably using them, they feel like smaller incremental steps of refining the same thing. And we've had this discussion where what you're really wanting is this inflection point where, like, all of a sudden you hit this point where it's just, and I don't see, mathematically, I don't see this. And we've seen several different, and I've pointed to scientific papers that say that there is, some upper bounds mathematically that you're going to achieve using this method. And we're starting to see some of that. The OpenAI has delayed now multiple times the release of 5. 0.1 is kind of 5, but it's kind of like a pre-release and preview of 5. It has its own issues. And you're seeing multiple, OpenAI and others are seeking new paths to make smarter AIs. Actually, one article that I saw that was really cool was, and I don't have it up right off the top of my head, but was from Cursor themselves. So how Cursor, this is something we've validated in the AI games. Cursor using Claude is better than Claude. That's right. Cursor leveraging Claude is better than Claude. And they do a lot of really cool things to basically make Cursor or Claude, or they do a lot of things to try to make it better. And it's actually really cool, some of the stuff that they do and had to do to make it smarter. I'm not saying it's actually thinking or smart at all. And so basically, this is why you should join the news, join my streams, is because I told you this a year ago. I told you this, that the current GPT was stunting AI growth. And the reason it was stunting AI growth is now everybody was doing these pre-trained generative transformers, and it had an upper limit. It had a cap. And what the real research needed to be doing was looking at something other than that. It's cool what we've been able to achieve. I actually think that there's things that it's useful for. That AI video is coming. I'm working on compiling all of the information. But yeah. This is another thing that I saw. I'm a huge against this. If you have to know a special language, if you have to learn a special language to use an intelligence, it's not super intelligent, right? One thing that you get with talking with a human, you can kind of figure it out, and they can kind of figure out what you mean too. And sometimes you have misunderstandings when talking to humans because they communicate differently than you expect. But the ability to adapt to that is powerful, whereas these large language models don't have the ability to adapt to how you think. You have to adapt to the way their models were trained. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And as we all know, AI is going to get rid of all the jobs. AI is going to have a huge firing spree because you have AI. All the jobs are going to go away. These companies aren't hiring super expensive, highly paid people to do AI stuff. The jobs are just fleeing. That's the end of the AI news. No sarcasm. No sarcasm at all. All right, we got some open source news coming right at you. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. There is a project that we've tried on stream, and it got a new release. Introducing Spin 3.0. Now, you don't know exactly off the top of your head what Spin is. Spin is a WASM backend for Kubernetes. Well, it's not just for Kubernetes. You can actually run it freestanding as well. But we were using it in Kubernetes as that serverless layer and trying that out. And I have to say, I'm kind of excited about Spin 3.0. Now, this was released in conjunction with KubeCon. Obviously, that happened last week. And there was a lot of good stuff that came out of it. What I wanted to point out was the one big pain point that we had as a community was that how to run it on Kubernetes used SpinCube, and it was rough. It was rough. It didn't work. The easy walkthrough didn't work. So maybe we're gonna have to give SpinCube another try to see if it's been updated with Spin and see if it's a little bit easier. I'm kind of excited about it because it was rough. We got WASM apps running on our Kubernetes Kubernetes cluster, and yeah, it was kind of cool once we got it working. It was a little painful though. So I'm very excited about this. I'm glad they released it. Of course, it's on Apache 2. It's a great license, a great open source license, And I'm excited to see more progress in it, to see where we go with Wasm. Maybe we can support it in the null cloud. We'll see. We will see. Along with that, there was an interesting, very, very catchy pull request made by the Torvalds himself to Linux, making Linux just a little bit better. I saw this. Avoid barrier no spec in a 64-bit copy from user. The barrier no spec in 64-bit copy from user is slow. Instead, use pointer masking to force the user pointer to all ones for an invalid address. The kernel test I don't know why I wanted to say reboot. The kernel test robot reports a 2.6% improvement in the per thread ops benchmark. Super cool. Super cool. You can expect your Linux to be faster when copy from user is called. Fantastic. Now, I saw several people claiming that Linux was going to be 2.6% faster. Kernel. Remember, kernel. There's a lot of other stuff that runs in user space and other stuff like this. So just keep that in mind. You might not see a 2.6% improvement on your machine tomorrow. And if you're not using Arch, it might not be tomorrow. I'm planning on getting it tomorrow. Does anybody review them? Yes, I do believe his gets reviewed. I'm not entirely sure. I don't watch all of them. I have seen them get reviewed. Unless Pac-Man breaks my arch. You know what? It happens sometimes. It happens sometimes. And that's just that just lets you know that you're on the bleeding edge. When it breaks, it's not Arch's fault. It is it's whatever bleeding edge stuff was pushed with Arch. All right, let's talk about the CNCF. The CNCF this week, with KubeCon North America, released the Technology Landscape Radar. I kind of call it a heat map. And it's not really a heat map as far as technology as a whole. It's mostly focused on the CNCF. Although there are some things outside of the CNCF that wiggle their way into it, which is fine. But it's a little confusing because there are then other things as well. I think they generally limit it to only the really popular things outside of the CNCF. But I wanted to review it with you guys because I have the time to review it with you guys, and I think it has some interesting things here. I think it has some really interesting things. So, the CNCF Technology Landscape Radar. Okay, so one thing to be really important when you're going through this 35-page review is that this was questions asked to people. This wasn't scientific data. This is really good to get people's feelings, but it doesn't actually mean more than people's feelings, right? Okay. So this doesn't mean that when people feel like it's more secure, that it's actually more secure. It's getting an idea of the community as a whole, or trying to at least. So you just got to make sure that you understand that this is the perspective of people going to KubeCon. This is the perspective of people using it, not necessarily scientific data that's been measured. It's not saying that we asked people that, took quantitative measurements of their infrastructure and found a price decrease of XYZ. This heat map and why I call it a heat map instead of a landscape radar is it's not built off of scientific data, it's built off people's feelings. Now, I think it's still valuable because a lot of these people that have those feelings have tested other products and things like that when they were trying to implement a solution. And there's a reason they picked that solution or had that feeling to it. So I'm not saying it's not valuable. You guys just need to go into it understanding what it is and what it is not. Now, they did a very good job of defining their methodology here. So it's not like they hit it. They actually did a very good job of going into their methodology later on in here, and we can cover it. But I've called out quite a few for not putting like the methodology that they use, the group of people that they interviewed. This didn't do that. This is actually a really good study, or really well done, at least from my perspective. All right, so the introduction, we'll skip that. Trends in DevOps technology usage. Okay, so this wasn't really DevOps technology usage. This was specifically multi-cluster application management. I mean, to me, that's a little bit more specific, very much more specific. So basically, this is how the feelings are. When they were asked about their feelings, hold means that they think the product is too immature. Assess means that they think that it has possibility. Trial means that it's gone beyond assessing it and they're actually testing it internally. And adopt means that it's really at the core of their infrastructure and usage. Now, you'll also know I, G, and S's here, and that stands for incubating, sandbox, and graduated. That's the CNCF's label of how mature the product is. So just because people have it in hold doesn't mean that it's not graduated. Hold just means that they don't know that it's useful, or people have the feeling that it's not stable or secure or whatnot. Again, this heat map is people's feelings. Remember that, because you'd be like, oh, well, Istio is graduated. Why are people? Anyways, it's because, again, it doesn't mean that it's not stellar. It doesn't mean that it's not stellar. It just is people's feelings on it. Okay. So I didn't see any real surprises here. The only surprise I had was that Backstage was so high. I felt like Backstage would have been in the same bucket as Linkerd and Istio. I also was a little surprised that Linkerd and Istio were so low on the list. I feel like those would have been more in trial or even adopt. So I guess the thing here that you have to look at is this is specifically for multi-cluster application management. Cilium surprised me in the fact that I don't classically think of Cilium for multi-cluster application management. It doesn't surprise me, though. Everybody uses Cilium. So when people think about it, they'll be like, of course, I used Adopt. So I think that this is maybe a little off because these two are just wildly used no matter what. And Argo CD doesn't surprise me at all because if you think of its main competitor, Flux, that's like the main difference between Argo CD and Flux. Flux has no multi-cluster abilities. It's single cluster only, and Argo CD is only multi-cluster. I mean, in theory, you can do a single cluster, but it's designed as a multi-cluster deployment strategy. So those don't surprise me as being in Adopt. I really felt like Istio would have been in trial, at least for me, if I had said this, because if you're trying to network across two clusters, it's probably one of the more stable ones that I know of. I've never tried Kubestellar or Kamada, so this was interesting in that there's like two more things to look at. But there's actually a couple things, and this is what I love more about this, is looking at, I did know about Kuma, I did not know about Pipe CD, Qvela, I did not know about. Meshery, I did not know about. I did know about Clusterpedia. So it's a good way to learn about upcoming things that people are evaluating and looking at too. So those were some. And if you'd like to have a stream of these, let me know in the Discord and we'll do a stream on them. Armada. Yeah, I have not thought of Armada here, but it's fine. Like I get it. I get it. I again was a little surprised it wasn't in the same as Istio, but yeah. So now this is an interesting thing, and this is actually going to be more interesting the further we get. This one kind of goes with like Cilium, of course. There aren't people that are really 1 stars or 2 stars, and you get a lot of people. And this is like the usefulness when they were asked to score it as a useful thing. Cilium is just useful. Like, what can we say? Cilium is just useful. And you kind of see that the further out in the ring that it gets, the less useful people have found it. The only one that I would say is this Kuma. It seems like people really find Kuma pretty useful for, it got a lot of 4 stars. It outpassed a lot of the other ones here. The same with Meshery, while still being out here. What I read from that is that Meshery and Kuma have a ton of useful applications. They're just not fully thought out yet. It's not fully there. Or they're a little bit more niche, like whatever they solve. Again, I haven't used Meshery yet, but if you want to explore that with me, I'm kind of interested in it. So, and then this was the maturity rating. Basically, people's feelings on how this doesn't surprise me. Cilium being up there as one of the more mature. It's used in a ton of places with, I guess, 1% on 1 star and 2 stars. 1 second, please. All right. And then this was the likelihood. We're gonna move on because I don't have too much more time because there's some. This is the one that I really wanted to talk about: batch AI ML compute technologies. Wanted to cover this really quickly because there's a couple interesting ones here. In our core adopt, we have Apache Airflow, and I think there's actually a really interesting trend on this one. So there's also Kubeflow, one that we've done here, which is still in the incubating phase. It's not a graduated technology. Apache Airflow, you'll notice there isn't a bracket. And the reason it's not a bracket, it's in the Apache ecosystem, not the CNCF. And it's also been here before all of this other stuff. So it's actually really cool that it was included in this because I think it's such a big competitor in the space. The same with Jupyter Hub. Okay, so why I find this interesting is that Kubeflow, while you get the usefulness rating here, and you see that Kubeflow is up here because this was a CNCF Kubernetes. So people here are Kubernetes people. What you got to remember, and thank you so much for the follow. What you have to remember is that Apache Airflow is not part of this community, and it rated this high. That has a lot to say for Apache Kubeflow and Unicorn. We'll get into Unicorn in a little bit because that's something I haven't touched yet, but we're going to have to try it because it has some really interesting things. Look at this usefulness rating. It is rated the most useful if you count 4 stars and up. Apache Unicorn is 4 stars and up, the most highly rated of all of them. And we weren't asking Apache people, we were asking CNCF people. That says something amazing about Airflow and Unicorn. I think that just is really interesting. And the other thing that you get with this, which is why I think this was such a good and well-rounded research by the CNCF, they did a very good job, was because it's not just the usefulness rating and people's feelings of how useful it is. They have the maturity rating. And what you'll see here is that Unicorn is a little lower on the maturity. It's a much newer project, but look at Airflow. Airflow's been around for a very long time. Very long time. It's not surprising that it has a great maturity. It's one of the cornerstones of a lot of these pipelines, not just for machine learning. So really no big surprises here. Kubeflow is not nearly as mature. We've talked about this. I've had my complaints. I love Kubeflow, by the way. It's just a pain in the derriere to actually leverage. I'm sorry. I know I'm flying through these. I only have a certain amount of lunch break. I almost feel like I need to recover this some uh at another time, maybe tomorrow. But I actually really want to do some unicorn stuff tomorrow. I want to have a unicorn. That's what I want. All right, the likelihood to recommend this is where it gets really interesting. Now we've seen this, Kubeflow here, Airflow's here, unicorns here. We can look at the rest, but I want you to see these things. That's in the maturity. The usefulness, Kubeflow's at the top for usefulness, Airflow's here, unicorns here. Let's talk about the likelihood to remember. This is the likelihood that you would tell somebody. Now, you'd almost think that this has to be Airflow, but it is unicorn. So many people are just so many people are finding unicorn to be useful. That's what it says to me. That if I was to look at any one of these are the old dogs. These are the old dogs, the Fluid here, the Kubeflow, Apache Airflow. They're kind of the old guard. They're useful. We know how to leverage them. We know what they're doing. But if you wanted to pick out of this a new up and coming one that I don't know anything about, but just looking over the data, it's this unicorn. Now, obviously, there's other stuff here that we can look at and understand better. But I kind of saw the data screaming unicorns doing something interesting, that people are rating it this way. And this is a really good way of looking at the normalized distributions of scores. Usage, Airflow, maturity, Airflow, usefulness, Airflow, and recommendation, Apache Unicorn. Now, one thing I have to say, CNCF, this does not bode well for the CNCF. Yeah. Apache killed it in this one. The Apache killed it. Now, that was all. I was a little disappointed because we really got two heat maps. We got multi-cluster and we got machine learning. I do wish we had done more than that in this. And if you guys want this, here is a link to it. I could have Togglebit's daughter dress me up as a unicorn. I suppose I could. That's a way. I think they'd have to sponsor me before I'd go that shilling. I need a sponsor. Or anyways, if you guys want to know, this is Apache Unicorn. Unleash the power of resource scheduling for running batch, data, and ML on Kubernetes. So my understanding here is that it's a cloud native scheduler basically for Kubernetes that's designed for batch data. So one of the things people don't understand is that the Kubernetes comes with a default scheduler, but you don't have to use it. You can replace it. Now, I don't know that for a fact. Like I said, I've never used Unicorn, but that's what it seems like to me. Hierarchical resource queues, application-aware scheduling, efficiency, central management console. It looks like it's a Kubernetes scheduler. So we might have to try it tomorrow. We might just have to give it a try. Now, that wasn't the only thing that came out of KubeCon this year. We also get the cloud, the CNCF announces a Cert Manager graduation. Now, I know that Cert Manager is core to a lot of people's things, and it, quite frankly, hasn't been graduated yet until today. Until 3 days ago. It's graduated now. Now, what does that mean, though, if you're new to CNCF stuff? Graduated means that it's had a security review. It means it's had other types of reviews, and it's passed those things. It's hardened. It's ready for main time. Prime time is what I was trying to think of. But we'll go with main time, and it's ready for you to leverage. Podman became CNCF this week too. I actually didn't see that. Thank you very much. You should drop a link because I missed that one. Wait, Podman was not part of the CNCF? I find that hard to believe. Podman really wasn't part of the CNCF? Is this some sort of conspiracy? You are not wrong. I still am going to say this is part of some sort of conspiracy, but I missed this. Excellent one. Excellent catch. I'm kind of surprised that Red Hat did this. I wonder the motivation. And I don't mean the motivation that they put here. I have, and I'm not saying that this is true of this, I have seen donating to the CNCF as a way of trying to get more other people to support your product. And again, I'm not saying that that's what's here. It's another thing when sometimes, and maybe this is what's happening, is it's not core to your product. So it's not core to, what Red Hat sells. And having them in that opens up the communities, gives a clear way for people to contribute. Because contributing to Red Hat, there could be people that are shy to contribute, like let's say OpenSUSE people are shy to contribute to because it's owned by a competitor. So that's actually a really good reason to do some of this, is to make it more broadly accessible to people to contribute. So I'm hoping that is the motivation here, and not that they're divesting from them. Yeah. Make it a Kubernetes standard and not just a Red Hat standard. Yeah. That would be really awesome. That would be a good reason. The other thing is that the CNCF announces a Dapper graduation. So if you're wanting to get a little bit more Dapper in your development, if you're wanting to just put that fedora on, although Red Hat ruined that analogy. If you'd like to, it's graduated. It means all of those same things that we talked about, where you've had that security review. It's also had a stable release. There's a lot more guarantees around the stability of the project going forward and the security of it as well. So it's really good to see them continue to push things into graduation. And it's awesome to see another, I don't personally leverage Dapper, but it's awesome to see these projects maturing in the ecosystem. And the very last thing was KubeEdge graduation. I think I covered this. This was like a month ago, but I just want to make sure that since we're going through the KubeEdge is a unique way of doing edge. There's different ways to think about the edge. There's people that think about the edge as in IoT stuff. And then there's people that think about the edge as in like your restaurant is the edge. And then there's people that think about the edge as getting closer to the consumer. And those three categories really depends on whether KubeEdge is the unique solution for you. But it's a very unique solution, and it's very cool. All right. We got to fly. I have 5 more. I got 10 more minutes. So we're going to fly through the section labeled Around the Web and then splash into Kubernetes full force, and I guess full force with our face, and see where we're going with that. All right. Interactive AI interviews are going to become a new norm. Is it really? It's here, it's real, it's incorporated. Now, if you guys don't know, I already got an AI to interview me, and I'll do it again. I found it to be poor at best. Now, if you're saying that you want to get rid of pre-screenings with some non-technical person, I think maybe if it's gotten better, maybe, but it's still pretty rough, and it does a pretty poor job because in the end, basically, you have to look through the transcript yourselves anyhow, and it didn't save me any time. I read slower than I can talk to somebody, so I could actually bust out more interviews than I could going through and like trying to understand what was written in response to certain things. So I'm not sure this is the way of the future, unless it's made huge improvements in the last 6 months. Faceplant. Pinterest exec. Companies that force workers back to the office are missing the big picture. So we've had a lot of return to the office stuff, and Pinterest came out and basically kind of called out JP Morgan, AWS, Eric Schmidt, and said the data doesn't show everything that you guys said. You know, JP Morgan was the person that said it stifles spontaneous idea generation, which I've always argued is a very bad thing, to rely on random neurons bumping into other people at the water cooler and their random neurons. It just means you have no set process for idea generation. And it makes team management challenging, means you didn't actually try to do team management. And then AWS said that it more seamless learning and teaching. They also said they had cultural problems. They had to pivot on the cultural problems, but their first thing was cultural problems. And then Eric Schmidt basically said that the company was being bad because they prioritized their workers' health, which was another really, really bad take. And then Pinterest came out and basically said they had hard evidence to show the opposite. So while some leaders insist that remote work is stifling innovation, collaboration, and productivity, hard evidence shows the opposite. So PinFlex is their remote working thing that balances flexible remote work, in-person collaboration. Employees who visit the office less frequently report, and then they go through to show a bunch of a Stanford study that said productivity for remote workers was up. They talk about how they have they have less turn in their remote, so they're not training new employees constantly because they have less turn in their remote employees. Yeah, you know, I think one thing that they didn't touch on that I always like is you get to hire the right person, not the right person that happens to be convenient, the best person that's conveniently located close to you. So there's a lot of things that go on here. So I wanted to point this out. In other round the internet news, I didn't have a really thing for this. .NET 9. It's kind of a big deal for a lot of people that aren't me. I'm not really in this. But what I wanted to point out is this. This is amazing. When you can handle more requests per second with drastically less memory. It's not that they traded off memory, you know, like memory increased, but we could handle more requests. They literally, this is a huge deal. Like, this is a huge deal. And so kudos to them. I saw this and I was like, I have to give them kudos. I didn't really have a spot to put it. I don't really know .NET. But when you can do this with your framework, and I would love for somebody to join the stream and tell me what you guys did to achieve this. Like, what did you leverage? What arcane magic did you use? Was this written in assembly? I don't know. But I would love to know. because it's good. So kudos to them. Let's go ahead and face plant. So I'm calling this section what to do when you accidentally lose all your customers. Well, VMware has had a problem. Broadcom bought VMware for a lot of money and then upped everybody's subscription, revoked perpetual licenses, and did a bunch of stuff. Okay, yeah. It stopped the sale of VMware perpetual licenses and started requiring subscriptions. They upped their cost by a lot. This wasn't even a small amount. Like, we're talking like tripling the cost of these subscriptions, and some were even more because it depended on which packages you use. So some people maybe didn't have that much higher a cost. Some people had drastically larger costs. And so they've started to do some stuff. VMware is making its workstation and Fusion desktop hypervisors free for everyone. That's something that they had stopped. They are trying. But my question to you, is it too little too late? Have people already put in the amount of effort to leave your platform? Did people think that VMware was so unique you could triple the price and you wouldn't leave? Those are good questions that I wish a Broadcom executive would join this show and talk to me about. Did you see VMware Player may use KVM in the future? The final insult to injury. The final insult to injury. All right, my friends, that is my lunch break as it be. As it is. I appreciate you joining. I got to jump off. I got to get stuff done. I have an entire day left ahead of me. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow on stream. And doing something kind of fun. We'll do something fun. I have to do a little bit more OCaml. I got to learn. I have got to get an OCaml web server running. Just the simple demo. That's all. That's all I'm asking. But we'll probably do some Rust too, because I just need to not hurt my brain too much. I'm also thinking that we might look at Unicorn tomorrow. So if you're interested in those things, join me. We're going to be doing some of those. Have a good weekend if you don't join. Remember, no streaming next week. I'm out. So I won't be streaming in any evening next week because I'm out. And then the next week after that, I'm on vacation. So I probably will stream, but it's going to be like random, not kind of the set times, because I have a little trip with the kids planned. And so we have some random stuff going on. So again, next week, random streaming. And anyways, have yourselves a fantastic weekend next week. I will try to do the news next week. It's going to be late because my flight gets in like an hour before the news. I'm not going to get home until about the exact time the news starts. And I'm going to be exhausted because it's a red eye flying all night long. So I'm going to then take a nap. Then I'm going to get up. Then we're going to do the news. So it's going to be late on Friday. When, I don't know. Join the Discord to find out. Thanks everybody for joining.